Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. The buy now, pay later space is pretty crowded, with Afterpay and Zipco competing with Klarna, Affirm, PayPal, and a whole bunch of others. To stand out, fintechs need to establish a point of difference, which is what my guest today has done. BizPay is a buy now, pay later provider, but it's business to business. David Price is the founder and CEO of BizPay and my guest this morning. David, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Sean, thank you very much for having me.
So, as I said, it's a very crowded market. How did you find your niche, the B2B niche?
Yeah, so we don't consider the B2B a niche really in a crowded market. We consider it a completely separate market segment. So you have the huge business to consumer segment of the market, which is over $10 trillion. And then there's this whole other side of the world's global economy where there is actually over $50 trillion of business invoicing being processed globally per year. And if you exclude merchants, which companies like Afterpay, Klarna, Affirm, PayPal have better access to, if you just exclude all of that, there's still $25 trillion of invoicing occurring through companies that none of the other players have access to. So if you think about lawyers, accountants, recruiters, none of those actually offer Square or PayPal as a payment option on their invoices. So the other companies don't have access to this whole other segment, which is at least $25 trillion. And there is this opportunity where all your professional service providers and other businesses are invoicing, and there's an opportunity to provide another way to pay on that point of invoice, which is very different to B2C, where you're generally providing another way to pay in the e-checkout cart. So you have an almost completely blue ocean opportunity that the rest of the buy now, pay later conglomeration of companies are not targeting and don't have any access to.
David, I must admit, I haven't really thought about the B2B opportunity, but as you say, it is blue sky. It's huge. So take me through how BizPay works. I'd imagine in terms of cash flow and some of those sort of typical business problems, this buy now, pay later invoicing actually could really help things.
Yes, exactly. So small to medium businesses all have a huge amount of cash flow volatility, and surveys consistently every year put it in the top 3 existential concerns for a business. So cash flows really are in the way of businesses just getting into their normal flow of doing business. They're waiting for customers that are late to pay them. In Australia, the average 30-day invoice is paid on 36 days, so about almost a week late. You also just have your general peaks and troughs of good months, bad months in a small to medium business of those cash inflows. And that really gets in the way of businesses being able to afford certain things that they need in those months where there is a bit of a dearth of cash available. So we know businesses have this need to smooth over cash flow. And historically, they have been using small to medium business loans or overdrafts or those type of
factoring, that sort of stuff,
product structures to assist them to smooth the flows. We've come in and we've said there is a different way to do it. We can solve your cash flow volatility with a very short tenured product. So what buy now, pay later has brought to the market is 2 very significantly new things from our perspective. So number one, it is seen as a payment product rather than credit or lending. Why that's really important is if you imagine a young millennial female walking into Zara to buy a dress, Afterpay could never say, Zara could never say, would you like a new credit card to buy this dress? Or would you like a bank loan to buy this dress? Distributing a credit or lending product at the point of sale is just too awkward. But they were able to say and are able to say, would you like to pay for this dress with Afterpay? Because it's seen as a payment product. So buy now, pay later is seen as another way to pay. It's the same thing on an invoice. If you're a big accounting firm or a big law firm, you're not going to say to your clients, do you want a small to medium business loan to pay for this invoice or some other financing product? So it's really key to being structured as another way to pay. So to be seen as another way to pay, it is really key that there's a short tenure. And that's what buy now, pay later has introduced to the market, that short tenure of 4 installments. The other thing that installments do has a very interesting psychological effect. When we pay for something with a credit card, if we go back to example of a dress at Zara, $150 dress, if it's on a credit card, still feels like $150 dress, just being paid for later. When you break something into installments, the psychology shows that the brain interprets it as more affordable and cheaper. So that is why both on the B2C side and the B2B side, you have the effects of increase in conversion rates, so more no's and maybes becoming yeses to the purchase, and an increase in basket size or transaction size. So splitting into installments actually creates an effect where buy now, pay later or BizPay is a sales tool for the supplier. So to run you through two practical examples, recruiters that use BizPay are able to go onto Seek or LinkedIn. 85% of the market don't use external professional recruiters. They try to recruit themselves. And one of the big reasons they're doing that is cash flow. It's not that they don't see or understand the value proposition of recruiters. They would like to use recruiters. They know recruiters will find them better candidates and save them time, especially. So recruiters are able to go on to Seek, for example, or another job board and say, did you know, we see you trying to recruit yourself. Did you know you can actually pay over 4 monthly installment? And they're able to convert a non-recruiter user into a recruiter user. So that's an example of an increase in conversion rate. An example of an increase in transaction size. Let's say there's a research firm and they're trying to sell a $30,000 piece of work to an end client. So they put a proposal to the end client. The end client says, I can't really manage 30,000. What can you do for a smaller project for 20,000? They can then go back to their client and say, did you know you can pay over 4 months with BizPay? It will only be 7,500 a month plus a small fee.
Okay.
And so suddenly it's more affordable. So they're able to get the $30,000 project over the line. So the buy now, pay later is bringing those effects of being seen as a payment product and actually working as a sales tool for a supplier. So it serves the needs of the supplier in terms of increasing their sales and revenue. For the end client, it really helps their cash flow. So it is a win-win. And how it works, to just run through the practicalities very quickly, we're generally a button on the invoice. So the law firm will send the invoice out and the end client will receive an invoice and it says pay the normal way via EFT or click here and pay via BizPay. Person will click that button, go into our system, and we'll very quickly process a sign-up and evaluation for them. And within a few minutes, they can be paying the invoice, which comes out of their account as direct debit. Where there's a slight tweak versus what happens on the B2C side of the market. On the B2C side of the market, merchants have been used to, for a long time, paying credit card fees. So they've been giving away 2.4% of their margin already. So when the Afterpays of the world came in and said, you're going to have to pay 4%, that's only an increase of about 1.6% of what they're used to paying. Service providers are not used to giving away margins. So there is more price sensitivity or elasticity if you charge them a significant margin. And what we found is that on the end client side, businesses are less price sensitive than individuals. So as long as the fee is quite small and very competitive versus other forms of credit and borrowing that they can do, they're not very sensitive to price. So we charge a little bit to both sides. We charge the supplier a very small fee, much smaller than B2C buy now, pay later's charge. And then we charge the end customer a little bit of a fee as well, but it's actually very competitive versus other kinds of borrowing, especially alternative borrowing. And so it ends up being really cheap for both sides and works really well. And we have two product variations at BizPay. So there's a product where you can pay installments every 2 weeks. The first installment's at 30 days when the invoice is due. And then you pay each of the 4 installments each 2 weeks. Or you can extend those to 2 weeks to a month. So pay installments each month. And so very simply, a $20,000 legal bill becomes $5,000 plus a small fee.
Okay.
And so it's much more manageable from a cash flow point of view for that money, that $5,000 took out of your bank account at the end of the month instead of the full $20,000.
Stay with me, David. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to David Price, founder and CEO of BizPay. Okay, so what's the take-up rate been like?
So what is different with B2B versus B2C is that the average transaction size that we do is about $17,000.
Right.
Whereas on the B2C side, it's $160. So our average transaction size is over 100 times larger than the B2C market. So we build up transaction volume much faster than B2C. When we acquire a customer, they're also using us more times per month than happens on the B2C side. So if you imagine again, the fashion example, how many times can people shop for fashion a year? I'm sure there's some people that can do it multiple times a month, but on average, it looks like it's 6 to 8 times a year if you're quite a fashion conscious millennial shopper. If you then pivot to the example of a small to medium business, they have multiple lumpy invoices every month. So that is what we see. We see our customers using us multiple times a month. So we have on average more than 30 transactions per year in the first year with a new customer versus on B2C, you see on average 8 to 12 in the first year. And each transaction is over 100 times larger. So the transaction volume being built up is so much more sizable per customer than what you see on the B2C side. So what happens with our business is we're actually constrained by our access to capital as a young business.
Yep.
The transaction volume really grows at a very exponential rate, and we have to grow into being able to manage that capacity. Or put another way, there's this huge market out there, $25 trillion. There's not a lot of competition out there. So there's more than enough demand to chase out there and capture. But it's more about growing the business's internal capacity and access to capital to manage all that demand. COVID has actually accelerated that. So you see that on B2C side and B2B side, people have had more cash flow constraints. They need more alleviating. So COVID has really supercharged buy now, pay later, both on the B2C side and the B2B side. And coming in Sydney now, coming out of lockdown, BizPay is actually running a back to business special where we've cut our prices in half. We just want to support the business community. So we're not making any profit on those fees. Just want to really support the community getting back to business. And when you're coming out of lockdown, what you find with many businesses is they haven't been operating. They need to restock and resupply their entire business. There's big upfront costs. So that's a perfect timing where you have all these big lumpy expenses up front, but you don't have your revenue yet. BizPay alleviates that for you. So you can stock up and then have those 4 months to pay it off. And over those 4 months, all your revenue comes back because you're getting back to business.
It's certainly a very, very interesting model and sort of given me something to think about because I haven't thought a lot about that. But David, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was David Price, founder and CEO of BizPay. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.